This is the Open University.
Oh, there you are. I didn't see you. There's been a bit of a hiatus in these Open University broadcasts, partly because I moved from the Pottery house that I'm back in now down to Nakameguro for 3 weeks. The room that I'm filming in, living in, just now was actually used as a rental space for an art exhibition or craft exhibition, I'm not quite sure which. During that 3 weeks. So I was down in my usual haunt, which is the cheapest and most amazing ryokan, essentially, a guest house in Nakameguro, which is £10 a night. And I had a beautiful room at the back this time of the guest house, which overlooked a temple grounds, which had a huge tree. Basically, my window faced the trunk and branches of a tree, so it felt a bit like a tree house. I started calling it the tree house. And there was a lot of heavy rain in late April, early May, and there would be lizards scuttling across my insect screen, or variety of mosquitoes and other insects coming in, rats scuttling on the very thin ceiling, so a whole family of rats up there. But this very cheap living, which involved having to go from one building to the next to take a bath or to use the microwave oven or whatever, much less luxurious than this place, where I have a whole house to at my disposal, with a bath and with a kitchen downstairs, 2 levels. This is great. It's great to be back here. But this area is a little bit more sedate and tranquil, old-age area. Nakameguro is really a young people's area and quite a wealthy area. It's an up-and-coming area, dominated by trembling little dogs and chic little art bookstores like Dessin books, which I would photograph and put on my Tumblr. I was slightly discouraged actually with the ratings, the viewership figures. Not enough of you were watching the last vlog, the one about spacism, whatever it was called, airspace. And I guess I thought, what the hell, why should I bother doing these things, So leave a comment saying, welcome back, Nick, we're glad to see you again, we really appreciate these, if you do. Be honest, but be forthright. And so I thought I'd come back and just fill in, a little my adventures in the last 3 weeks. I'm still, the big picture is that I'm still having to waste, inverted commas, 6 months of my life between living in Osaka last year and starting a new lease in Berlin in July this year. So, but it's been a fantastic travel-packed, adventure-packed 6 months so far. I've got about 6 weeks left of it before I relocate to Europe, to Neukölln, back to Neukölln. So in a certain sense, it looks as if my whole life has switched into a kind of reverse pattern now, where I'm going to retrace my steps one by one. I've got, according to the BBC How Long Will You Live poll, I've got about 30 years left to live. So perhaps I'm going to just retrace the last 30 years in reverse. All the cities I lived in, New York, Paris, probably not New York again. I think it's out of my pocket now. Nakameguro was also out of my league pocket-wise. But I sort of appreciated that. I appreciated the irony of the fact that I was living in this, basically a flop house full of old men coughing with sort of lung conditions and things. But then I would go out. I bought a bicycle, a very cheap, 7,000 yen, $70 bicycle. So I was exploring a bit that whole South Meguro area as well. But I would go out of my door and I'd walk down and get these very expensive types of bread, or the Dessin bookstore, or I'd see beautiful architecture. Something I'm very attuned to is nice, small, modern Japanese houses. So I saw one, happened to be showing a friend the area, and I said, look, up this side street behind the Dessin bookstore, there's this amazing house. It's called the Hut and Tower House, and it's designed by O&H Architects. I found this out by talking to the owner, actually. The owner was sweeping the street or cleaning up, doing something outside his house. and I was pointing up at his house and saying, "Kirene, Kirene, it's beautiful, isn't it?" We started talking to the guy who told me that I thought was a house maybe from the 90s, because the concrete style of it is like a mini skyscraper or a little fire watchtower, actually. The style of it suggested 90s to me, but apparently it's just 3 years old. And it's by this company called, O&H Architects, Onishimaki and Hayakuda Yuki. They're a husband and wife team, and they're very young. I think Maki teaches at architecture at one of the colleges. They're building all sorts of other projects, like they've made a beautiful gas station, Enios gas station. But architecture is something I've been attuned to, and one of the highlights of the last couple of weeks was going with Noriko, who's actually the potter who rents this place and sublets it to me when she's not here. She's based in China most of the time, in Shanghai, and but she took me to Yanaka, which is this very nice sort of cafe and graveyard area just north of Ueno, to meet some other architects who were they were called Ku architects, and they're called KM, who's actually from Singapore, Satoko, his Japanese wife, and Jin, their child. And they have a house they've designed and built themselves in Yanaka called the Familiar House. So we spent about 4 hours drinking coffee and talking about architecture, sort of gossiping about other architects, the people they like, the people they don't like so much, and their values and, general things about life in Japan. And I'm going to sit out here just to make a bit of variety. And that was really fascinating. The other thing I've sort of got attuned to is pottery. When the McCliments were here, the McCliments came from Australia on their way to Europe. They used Japan as a little airstrip, one kind of stopping off point to break the long flights. And they're going to come back again at the end of May, actually, on the way back to Australia. They've been in Venice and Paris. But we went to some amazing places. We went to Kamakura on a very sunny but windy day and got a bit lost in the suburbs of Kamakura. The beach was uninhabitable, basically, because it was like a sandstorm in the desert. But we also, they took me to this place they'd found out about, which was called the Science, what's it called? Research Institute for Nature Study. It's a garden, it's a park, a really wild park in Meguro, right next to Meguro Station, the Yamanote line, which I'd lived in Meguro for, a year and never known about this place. I knew about the museum next door, where there's an interesting Art Deco exhibition on just now, but I didn't know there was this wild nature space next to it. So we rambled there on a very beautiful sunny day. And another garden I found actually is called the Koishikawa Botanical Garden. Just, one by one been discovering these other places. Strange little museums as well, like the Hatakeyama Memorial Museum of Fine Art, which is actually a tea ceremony museum in between Shinagawa and Ebisu. Beautiful gardens there as well. I mean, quite small, but very green and atmospheric gardens, and this 60s sort of brutalist museum with tea ceremony stuff in it, set in these gardens. Really a magical little space. Where else have I found? The Japan Folk Crafts Museum. That's next to an amazing gardens as well. Out sort of quite near Kono Books, which is one of my favourite, which is actually the favourite of my second-hand bookstores with English language books, or French and German books as well. And there was also a beautiful literature museum on the other side of that park. But the Japan Folk Crafts Museum, I guess what I respond to, I like to buy postcards of pots. I wouldn't like to buy actual pots, but I like postcards. I'm collecting postcards of pots now, and I put them up as if they were sort of little pots, but they're purely representations of pots. That's very me, to prefer the representation to the real thing. Extensible into all sorts of areas, possibly, even maybe sex, pots, I probably got a bit middle-aged. Maybe this is why my viewership is declining. I think middle-aged people often have a very obviously sublimated sexuality, so they get into gardening or pots or, sort of these rather sedate things which nevertheless are very symbolic of wombs and penises and, you know, all sorts of things which they've sort of a little bit left behind. What I leave out of these vlogs is the humping, jumping and pumping sort of part of my life, which obviously is still going on and does take up a large part of my time, but I don't really talk about it. I guess if I did, my ratings would go up, but, you know, there's more to life than ratings. Since there's no commercial angle to these things, I just make them for my own amusement. Anyway, what else have I discovered? It's not humping, jumping and pumping. Bicycle, yeah, cycling a lot. Going to Kamakura. Yeah, various architecture and stuff like that. I've been, talking of Kono books, I sort of got into Claude Lévi-Strauss a little bit, buying secondhand books about and by him. And also Julia Kristeva. She wrote this fantastic book, which is called The Powers of Horror. This came out in 1980. And she's sort of controversial the last couple of months because she's still alive. She's Bulgarian originally. She came to Paris in the 60s. She got a special dispensation to come to Paris and study. And she stayed, quit Bulgaria and married, I think, Philippe Solers, the writer. And but this is an amazing book. The Bulgarian files have been opened, and she was revealed as having been a secret agent spying on behalf of Soviet-era Bulgaria, reporting, you know, on various intellectuals. And all she was doing really was just ensuring that she was able to keep things square with the government while she was outside the country. So, and also she wanted to move her family from Bulgaria to Paris. She didn't succeed in doing that because the information she was giving the Bulgarian spy authorities was junk. It was just stuff they could find anyway, you know, in various other ways. So she wasn't really a spy. She was just doing what everybody had to do in that time of the Iron Curtain to stay, you know, to try and keep square with everybody. But this is an amazing book because it's about abjection. The sexual elements of abjection, the psychoanalytical elements of abjection, the literary elements of abjection, looking particularly at writers like Georges Bataille, Céline, semiotics of biblical abominations, so looking at the book of Leviticus and all the things that the Judaic religion tried to banish and say were unclean or should not be mixed with other things. Don't mix the milk sink with the meat sink, all that stuff. Kind of fascinating. I mean, you're very aware when you travel from one culture to another how these taboos, how these abominations are differing from culture to culture. Some of them have a universal element, like the incest taboo, obviously, but others don't. Anyway, Julia Kristeva, this book has really fascinated me over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, I don't know, what else do I have to tell you? I've been having some problems with my credit card. I'm very happy-go-lucky financially. I've got money. I've got enough money to see me through to July, to my new life in Berlin. I've been writing an article, making money writing articles. So I wrote one for Moose magazine, the upcoming edition of Moose, and it's about instagenic. Instagenic is the title. Instabuy is the Japanese word of the year from 2017, and instabuy means something which is worthy of uploading to Instagram. It's Instagrammable or it's instagenic. And this obviously comes from the word photogenic, and there's obviously, it's kind of extension of what in the 19th century was called the picturesque. We still talk about the picturesque, but now we have a more technically specific way of talking about the picturesque. So I was really thinking about this whole question of definition of the picturesque. I asked the McClimats, and they actually defined the picturesque as something just overwhelmingly beautiful, almost the sublime, the idea of the sublime, which is the opposite of the abject. So that was an interesting tie-in there. But I see picturesque. My dad used to call it picturesque in a kind of ironic voice because he thought it was suspect, and I was therefore led to follow that interpretation of picturesque, that it's something corny, sordid, suspect, because it's conformist and cliched. That if something's picturesque, it looks as if it's been in a picture before, or it looks as if it's going to be in a picture in the future. It's already a picture, even when it's something out there in the real world. It's already, in a sense, been framed. It's been pre-chewed, pre-digested. It's not a very original thing to do. I always try to take photos which are not picturesque. But nevertheless, as a photographer or an artist, as someone engaged in visual making, even making vlogs, there are certain cliches. I always have my clothes up in the background, these sort of exotic pants which I collect all over the world. They're always somewhere in the background of these videos. So there is this lexicon of cliches of my own making, which are not cliches in general terms, but they are cliches in terms of what I tend to show you. Same with my Tumblr vlog, which I've moved to a secret location. I've moved to another, not that secret, another place on Tumblr, a slightly different address. So I haven't updated the Mrs. Chiswick Tumblr for a while. But I noticed that within that there's a lexical set of, bollards, hazard stripes, pots, certain views of things. I took a photo this morning in the bath of my feet touching the metal corner of the bath, the rounded metal corner, which had a reflective surface, which made it look as if someone with 5 feet and spindly legs attached to them was sitting on the other side of the reflection. And I thought of that phrase of mine, actually, that every lie creates the parallel world, in which it's true that every reflection creates a parallel world, which is an actual, according to some theories in physics, it's an actual universe out there, a parallel universe. So I was thinking, who is that creature with spindly legs and 5 feet, that's sitting in the bath with me? That's the kind of thing you think when you're in the bath, and probably that's a good place to end this vlog. And I want to wish myself welcome back to vlogging, because I haven't done it. In a way, it's my public face now, and I just had a private face for the last weeks, which is interesting in itself. But it's quite good to. I think it's quite good to just blether, talk to you guys. So, you guys. Oh my God, I said you guys. Sorry, that's something I never ever do. But then again, maybe not saying you guys has become a cliche. It's become one of my lexical repetitions. Anyway, enough. Oh, actual real sync this time, real live, not edited at all, just spiel. Anyway, yeah, live spiel. See you next time. This is where I walk out, pretend I'm going somewhere, but in fact there's nowhere to go here. But I'm going to pretend there is.
Open University.